about the things.
And welcome to Corner Cafe. I am Rachel Maynes, and today I have my good friend Angie Austin on the show. Welcome, Angie.
Hello there, Rachel Maynes.
Well, we've known each other for many, many years. We met in news, and I think, this was a God connection for sure.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. We met in TV news, and you were my floor director, and I was doing the morning show then, Weather, I believe, the Weather Woman, and then we work together now in radio, so we worked together off and on for well over a decade. That's probably more like 2.
Yes. During our time together in news, you were, a mentor to me. You have a lot of experience in media. You helped me to better what I do on the floor and how I run it. How did you get started in media?
Well, that's a good question. Okay, when I was in college, I really thought about what I wanted to do. And interestingly enough, my husband just said to me the other day, boy, if I could do it again, I would have done something different other than news, because now for almost 15 years, he's run his own business, but he was a director in news. He started in Chicago. And I said, I would do it the same. And he said, no, you wouldn't. I said, yeah, I would. I had fun. It was fun. I still have fun. And so I was at school, University of Colorado in Boulder, 3rd generation. Now my son is 4th generation. He just started there. And I thought, what do I want to do? And I was in mass communications, economics, and psychology, like a triple emphasis degree. And I really liked the communication side. And my dad was also very involved in speaking, announcing basketball games. He started the radio station at his university. He had a really great voice. And I was I went to a lot of theater with him and things where people were kind of using their ability to communicate to make a living. And I thought it'd be fun. I thought I'd be good at it. I'm not bad at ad-libbing, and really the only thing I'm good at is talking and maybe I'm kind of funny. And so I thought, wow, I'm hilarious and I can talk. What can I do with that? Not a lot. So I did an internship at Channel 4 in Denver, and then I got my first job. I moved to Los Angeles, and I really wanted to work for one of the big stations there, and I got my first job at NBC in LA. And they paid $10 an hour, and I ripped scripts. But I was like, wow, some of those other jobs people are doing in the union, I could do those, and they're making over $100,000 a year. And this is in the early 1990s. So I started working, filling in on the assignment desk, and I was an assistant to the assignment editor. And they were the ones that were in the union that were making really good money. They'd assigned all of the cameramen and all of the reporters and the helicopter. They've moved them all over a huge area of Southern California, like Santa Barbara, Riverside, Orange County, Los Angeles, out in the valley, all over the place. It was a huge area we covered. And so in those stations, we'd fly the chopper around for big stories like wildfires and stuff like that. And the riots, I was there during the riots. Okay, so within 6 months, I did get a union job on the assignment desk, and I started making 6 figures, which was amazing to me because I had lived in low-income housing 6 months prior to that. While I went to college and high school, I worked full-time 7 days a week. So this was quite a nice boost in my pay. So then as time went on, I wanted to do on-air work. So every weekend I would go to Santa Barbara and I would do weather for $10 an hour again. And then I kept, of course, my good job up in LA for, I'd say, at least a decade doing the assignment desk. And one of the cool stories I did that everybody always asks me about is O.J. Simpson. They were looking for him, the cops were, and I kept getting tips all day long, O.J. Simpson's in Orange County getting ice cream. And I'm like, okay, sure. Oh, hi, I saw O.J. at 7-Eleven. And I'm like, But then one of my great tipsters who was never wrong, roll called, and he said, the cops are following this white Bronco on the 405, and O.J.'s in the back of the Bronco. And so I call my boss over. I'm like, this is legit. This guy's never wrong. He heard it on the scanners. There's a pursuit on the 405, and O.J. Simpson's in a white Bronco. Can I launch the chopper? Because you always had to get permission because it was so expensive to fly.
Right.
So we launched a chopper, and we're the first station on the O.J. Simpson pursuit, which ended up being the biggest pursuit in the history of TV news.
Right.
But then as time, then other choppers got on it. Well, then, of course, we ran out of gas first because we were the first chopper on the scene. So you have to work out these deals with the other helicopters. And so you have to call the other stations and be like, hey, Fox 11, it's Angie over at NBC. I was wondering, can we swap out signals? Can I use your chopper for 5-10 minutes while we refuel, and then you can use mine while you refuel? And we worked out all these deals, so because you don't want to lose the signal, because it's the biggest pursuit in like the history of TV news. So that was kind of fun. So that was a very stressful job. You had a lot of like angry cameramen, like, why did you send me here? Or the fire is out, or I don't want to work with that reporter. Or this reporter would come up to me and he said, if you ever assign me to that cameraman again, I'll have your job. Like, I didn't know who didn't want to work with who. And it's hard to navigate Southern California with a map book. We didn't have cell phones then. You had to open up this giant book and then do grids and streets and go, your location is on page 52, grid, A7. But it would take me like 10 minutes to figure out where to send them. It was so complicated.
Oh, I couldn't imagine that.
Yeah. And then you'll have like guys in the union that are mad that you send them to the wrong address. So the fire was across the street once. And one of my favorite guys, Jolly, he got there. And one of my other guys, Larry, that was really angry, he was sitting in a lawn chair across the street. And Jolly said, why aren't you getting video of the fire? He goes, well, this is the address they sent me to. So I'm just going to sit here in my lawn chair because she gave me the wrong address.
That's hilarious.
So even though the fire was across the street. So I started doing weather because I wanted to do something happier, because news is very violent and sad and angry and upsetting when children are hurt especially. So I thought weather in LA was very happy. So I did weather in Santa Barbara, and I'd say within less than a year they hired me to do weekend weather in LA. So then I'd do Monday through Friday on the assignment desk. I'd get off at midnight, and I'd have to be up at like 3 or 4 in the morning the next morning to do the weather. And so I would sleep in the Tonight Show dressing rooms, which it sounds real glamorous. They were really old in the old building, and like mice in there and like old couches. Like I think Pat Sajak used to sleep on this one couch that in this dressing room that I would try to sleep in, but it just, I couldn't sleep. It was so, security guards are walking by and the light came under the door and a mouse ran over me. So because it was too far for me to drive back to, I lived at the beach. It was too far to drive. So every Friday night I'd sleep for 3 hours on this couch. And once we had an earthquake, and I had to get up in the middle of the night and do the earthquake coverage, which was kind of nerve-wracking because that really wasn't my area of expertise. And you're on live, and everybody in Southern California is tuning in, and I'm the only one at the station. And I'm like in my 20s trying to do earthquake coverage at a major station in Southern California. So that was kind of nerve-wracking. But so then after doing weather for a while, then I got a morning show job in San Diego, and I was the morning show host with a guy, John Elliott. He's now worked in New York City for many years. He's very talented. So we had a blast doing that morning show. And then as time went on, I moved back to Colorado, where I grew up, and I lived not far from University of Colorado Boulder, where you went to school, coincidentally, as well.
Yeah.
And I started working for Channel 2 in Denver, where I met you, and I did weather, and then later on I did anchor the morning show for a while. And then when I left news, they didn't renew my contract, and I got an offer at Channel 4 to work on their morning show, but I wanted to do something with my faith, and you can't do your faith in TV news. Mm-hmm. And so I started the Good News about 12 years ago here at your station. And it's been on other Crawford stations as well. But Colorado's Christian station has been the main KLTT station that I've been on. And I've been doing this for 10 years now.
Yeah. Wow. Time does fly, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, whenever we kind of talk about, we met and how long, I'm like, what? And then when I see your kids, of course, kids are a great way to see how fast time flies because they grow up way, way too quickly.
I know. You were at my son's baptism. You sang at his dedication, and he just started college.
Yeah, that is insane.
So we have known each other 20 years.
That is incredible. One thing about you, Angie, is your work ethic and just hearing all these jobs that you did and the sacrifice. How did you learn about work ethic? Was there anything in particular, a memory where you're like, you know what, I'm just going to work really hard and I'm going to be successful? Do you have anything that you can recollect?
Yeah, I was so irritated that through no fault of my own, I was growing up very poor in a bad environment. I lived in foster homes. I lived in low-income housing. I lived with my dad a little bit. And then one day, my stepmom didn't want us, and he drove us cross country and left us on my grandma's, steps. And so then I was with my mom for a while, but my parents, my dad was an alcoholic. I mean, very highly educated. He got his PhD. He ended up being a great guy later, but we were estranged for like 35 years. And so he drank. He was abusive mostly to my mom and my brothers. And then I had two brothers that had drug addiction problems. One of them was murdered in Boulder many years ago, and the other one has been homeless for the majority of his life. And then my brother, who didn't use drugs, graduated in the top 1% of his class at West Point Military Academy, one of the most prestigious universities in the country, ranks right up there with Harvard and Princeton and, the Naval Academy, and I mean, just really up there. So he did extremely well. And when I was younger, I saw like, wow, the only person that's really doing well in my family is the one not drinking and doing drugs. So I was never tempted to do either of those. And I think that I was so irritated that I'm so smart. Why am I living in low-income housing? I am so smart. Why am I made fun of at school for being poor? There's nothing wrong with me. I have everything working for me that I could get ahead in life. I'm just starting way behind the starting line. Mm-hmm. I'm not starting equal to everybody else. I'm way back there. So I started working full time, 7 days a week, all through high school and college. Didn't have any college debt, put myself through school. I actually graduated with, I was saying yesterday to my father-in-law, I had $12,000, which may not sound like much now, but tuition was only $500 a semester then. And so I saved up all that money. I had no Pell Grants, no loans, no help, no nothing, which I could have. I guess know enough to even apply for all that stuff. I just worked. And then when I got to LA, I also pretty much worked 7 days a week. I'd say I worked 7 days a week until I was in my mid-30s, maybe.
Wow.
And I don't work that much now, which is kind of nice because I have all these teenagers and, family and good marriage and lots of time put into all of those. But, yeah, I was determined to be successful, and I was determined to not let my circumstances hold me back from, what I wanted to achieve. And I just didn't think it was fair that I was in this situation. So I wanted to make a better situation for myself and for hopefully my kids, which I definitely have. I've never been to Europe still because I worked so much I didn't go on vacation. So that's one of my big things in the next, year or so. I'm finally going to do some of the, I travel a lot with my kids,
mm-hmm.
but in terms of far, big vacations, I didn't take those when I was working in LA for that decade. I didn't really do anything but work.
Yeah. Wow. So, just that self-determination and your faith in God really helped to spur that kind of ambition. So, Ange, when you hear someone making excuses who didn't, start out the best in life, I'm sure that doesn't really work with you, right? Because you're like, well, look at what I did. I made it work. I worked hard.
I don't like finger pointing. I think finger pointing is really lame. And my mom, for much of her life, was a bit of a victim, and I don't like the victim mentality because I do believe there are a lot of things that are in your power to succeed or to get out of a predicament. And so I don't really respect people who are not successful and not happy. And I don't just mean successful financially. I just mean they're not happy with their lives, but they sit in their lounge chair of laziness or despair or victimhood and then point the finger at everybody that's ruined their lives, their life for them. And really, it's up to us, And you mentioned faith. When I was 12 and then turning 13, I lived with an aunt who was also very abusive. She was mentally ill and not kind to me at all, but she did take me to church. And so I had my diary from back then, which she ended up stealing, but I remember I wrote in there that she just was not right in the head. And so I wrote in there how I'd, become a Christian, and I put the date in there and everything. And I'm very grateful for that because that really was life-changing for me because then I had that foundation that taught me right from wrong and gave me that love that from a family that maybe I wasn't getting, that I kind of felt that love in my heart. So that was huge for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously you can see the Lord working in your life all the way through up till now. And now you're on KLTT AM 670. And, just ironic that I was working with you in news so many years ago. And here we are working together again in radio. I've been talking with Angie Austin. We're going to take a break, but we'll be right back.
Someone recently asked me why I like Trump. My answer was that I don't really like a lot of things about Trump. But this election is not about choosing the most likable person. We are voting between two vastly different ideologies. We are voting for the country we want to leave our children and grandchildren. Trump represents that future and has proven that he can deliver. He is a patriot to the core and even served his country for 4 years without pay. That moment when someone says, "I can't believe you're voting for Trump," I simply reply,
I'm voting for the next Supreme Court justices to protect the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I'm voting for a return of our troops from foreign countries and the end to America's involvement in foreign conflicts.
I'm voting for the Electoral College and for the republic in which we live. I'm voting for the continued appointment of federal judges who respect the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I'm voting for keeping our jobs in America, not to be outsourced all over the world to China, Mexico, and other foreign countries.
I'm voting for doing away with all of the freebies given to all of the illegals and not looking after the needs of the American citizens and homeless veterans. I'm voting for the military and the veterans who fought for this country.
I'm voting to keep men out of women's sports. I'm voting for peace progress in the Middle East. I'm voting to fight against human and child trafficking. I'm voting for freedom of religion. I am voting for the return of teaching math, history, and science instead of the indoctrination of our children.
I'm not just voting for one person. I'm voting for the future of my country. I'm voting for my children and my grandchildren to ensure their freedoms. America is the greatest country in the world, hence why everyone wants to immigrate here. So why do you want to change it? Why do politicians want to enact policies that have failed in other countries throughout history? I'm not voting for Trump, I'm voting for America. Your vote counts in this election.
Welcome back to Corner Cafe, and I'm talking to my good friend Angie Austin. Angie, thank you so much for coming back on the Corner Cafe, and I just want to thank you too for all these years of friendship.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, one thing I would say about you, because I did get, a little bit busy with, I would say, like the kids' life, work, and then maybe we wouldn't see each other for 6 months. But one thing I've always told you I love about you is you never let our friendship go. You would always put the effort in. I mean, we easily could have gone, our separate ways when I had kids, and, you don't have kids right now, and you've been single, and you've had, your career that you really focused on, and, you've done it all on your own, and it is a struggle sometimes to be by yourself because you're financially responsible for yourself, you're saving for a home by yourself. And so I do think, being single is a journey that takes a lot of effort. And yes, I did have those kids that took away, my time from, hanging out with you as much during those years. Not as much now because they're kind of more self-sufficient. But you always put the effort into keeping in touch and calling me and let's do lunch, or texting me and what's going on. Do you want to chit-chat on the phone? Or I'm driving home. Do you want to talk about this issue that we might kind of hold each other like accountability partners? We'd still talk over the years about what was going on, and you'd make sure that we met and kept our friendship going. And I appreciated that about you.
Oh, well, thank you, Angie. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's a gift that God gave me, but I like to keep in touch. And, the important people like yourself definitely want to keep that friendship going. And, I have friends all the way since I was in middle school, all the way up until college and beyond. And I'm thankful. I think relationship is important. You have your family relationships, but, I know that the Lord has instilled in you the value of friendship and relationship.
Yeah, I think so. I think that in terms of, relationships, we've talked about this before. I think the Harvard Happiness Study, and if you've heard about it, I apologize, but I think it's so important that they've done decades and decades of research on all these people, these families, and they had them write, really in-depth essays. They did interviews, and then it went from one family, then they had kids, and then they started interviewing those kids, and it's gone on for so long. And so with all of those interviews and all of that research, they found that the biggest indicator of happiness is connections, relationships. And so I've really determined in the last, I'd say 5 years, how important those are. Mm-hmm. I've got a girlfriend in California that also went to University of Colorado Boulder, and we both became weather women in San Diego when we both applied for the same apartment to live in La Jolla, California, but we'd never met. And when we met, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're me, I'm you. We're like mirror people. This is so weird. It's like you, we had so much in common. And so we just had our phone date last Friday. And so we might have a phone date every 2 or 3 months. And I'll see her when I go to California, but we haven't worked together in decades, but we've kept in touch because she's just so delightful. And when you have that history with someone, like I remember when she was engaged. I remember when we were in Vegas and her fiance left her in Vegas. I remember when she tried to have kids and she couldn't have kids. I remember when she tried to adopt these two, foster kids and it didn't work out. And then she tried to adopt a baby. It didn't work out. Well, now she has a kid in first grade, that she got as an infant. So I've been on that whole journey with her. So why wouldn't you want to keep that person in your life that knows you so well, and that she just went through a divorce? Like, I'm here for her. I knew the guy. I knew the whole, you want those people that really know you, and that also, as a person of faith, that we can hold each other accountable if we feel that they're straying on a path they shouldn't. Like, you're not always open to my advice, but sometimes I give it anyway. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you just want to tell your friend what you think is best for them, even if they don't want to hear it,
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to have people like you, and I'm thankful for our friendship. And for giving me advice, even if I don't want to hear it. I think that's important.
You're honest, though. You're like, well, I'm telling you it. I'm not asking for advice right now. You'll say that. You go, I'm not asking for advice. I'm just telling you about this, but I just want to preface it by saying I'm not asking for advice. You're so funny.
It seems, for some reason in my life, seems like everybody wants to give me advice. I literally get it all the time.
So funny.
Which is funny. I'm like, why does everyone think that they need to tell me what to do? But, we need to discern between, friends like you who love and care for us, and then all the others in our lives too that just, perhaps people just love telling people what to do. I don't know. But Angie, with your show, The Good News, you left news and you wanted to share good news. So kind of talk about how you started the show and where the idea came from.
I initially started sharing good news, like actual good news stories. Like yesterday, one I would have used for sure was this janitor, and all these kids really liked him, and they said, what would you want, for your birthday if you could have anything? And he said, a Jeep Wrangler, but I can't afford it. And so the kids started to GoFundMe, and these kids bought him a red Jeep Wrangler, and he just fell on the ground when he got it. He was just so excited. But what was neat about these kids is they're like, he's like a second dad, and he loves us, and he gives us advice, and he's so kind, and he's always there for us. And his love for them was so genuine that they believe he loves them because he shows it. He doesn't just say, I care about you kids. He shows it. Mm-hmm. And so they got him this red Jeep. So that would be a story that I would put in my good news program. And then I would talk about it with my friends. But then it kind of moved a little bit more towards, the good news of the Bible and talking about our faith, and then having people come on. And I had some of the best testimonies I've ever experienced, where I had ex-cons, former, prisoners in for very serious offenses who'd spent, a decade or more in prison, crying in my studio, talking about how they, accepted Christ as their Savior in prison. And one guy had been very successful. His name is Skip. And Skip had been very successful in real estate and business. And after, I think it was the Deckers fire or something like that, with his real estate, he fudged a few things and did a couple of signatures on stuff to try to save deals, or to try to, keep from losing a lot of money. And then he said, spiraled out of control, where one lie led to another, led to another, led to another. And then he went to prison. And they kept trying to get him to come to church, and he wouldn't go. And he's an accountant, so he started doing the books for the prison. But it was one of those prisons where they had farming and other things going on. And so he really turned it around, financially. He really helped make this particular type of prison successful, because he was able to get the books in order and figure out how they could make more money. Well, on Christmas Eve, he'd been refusing to go to church with everybody. And on Christmas Eve, the pastor came to where he was working, if I recall correctly, in the prison, and he brought some rather large inmates with him, and they said that they wanted him to come to church that night, and then if he refused, that this giant man was going to carry him in. And wow. So he walked into the church, and he said when he was walking down the aisle, he said that he was just overcome with this feeling, this joy or relief or peace, and he just fell to his knees and was sobbing. And so that was life-changing. Then he started working with homeless teens when he got out of prison and started a nonprofit. And then two of the other guys that were there with him, their testimonies were equally as moving, and they were in. And then Charles Frederick, that works at Cherry Hills. He was in for attempting to hire someone to kill his brother-in-law because he was doing some things, and so his sister-in-law, or his sister, was like, I want him dead, which is so crazy if you know Charles, because he's a gentle giant, right? Mm-hmm. So he never did anything. He talked to someone about it, but that was conspiracy to hire someone to murder someone or something of the sort. So he was in it for about a decade, and his sister went to prison too. But what's amazing about that is she stayed married and they reconciled.
Oh, my gosh.
I believe everything worked out with the husband.
I did not know
Charles, that. Yeah, but I know it's a miracle. And with Charles, he gave his life to Christ while he was in prison. I mean, he knows that Bible backwards and forwards. And now he works with people as they're, exiting the prison, and they're in the program for, like, let's say, the halfway houses. And he takes these guys to church. He takes them on outings. They get involved in feeding the homeless. I mean, his whole life now is devoted to the Lord, and he works at one of the largest, most prestigious churches in Colorado.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with my brother-in-law. Yeah.
Yes.
What a crazy connection, too, that you were connected to him, and my sister's married to one of his really good friends. Just a small world. Angie, Corner Cafe is under the brand Influencers TV, and, I see influence as everyone has influence. It's not just the quote-unquote influencers of the society, the famous people. But how do you see influence, and what do you think is a positive influence, and how can we be a positive influence?
Well, I think, that's something I struggle with all the time because I have teenagers, and then you get angry and you yell at them and then you apologize. And, it's interesting because I've raised kids that now are waking me up to go to church. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I've raised kids that there's a new Bible study because my kids go to Fellowship of Christian Athletes. They go to Young Life. They have a Bible study in the morning, and then they have their youth group at church on Sunday nights, and then they go to church Sunday morning. So that's like 5 times, right? So then they've been getting up for another Bible study. They get up at 6 a.m. before school 2 or 3 days a week, depending on the week. And I'm like, well, what's this new Bible study, and who's leading that? And Faith, my daughter, said, oh, Hope's leading it, my older daughter. I'm like, what? And she said, yeah, she's teaching the younger athletes. She's working with the younger volleyball and like basketball players, the freshman and the sophomore, and she leads the Bible study. We meet at Starbucks once a week, and Hope's the leader. And I'm like, what? And so, like, here I've raised these kids that, like, they're leading now, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I don't really know how that happened. Like, my son, he's not in the Greek system at University of Colorado Boulder. His Greek system is Young Life, and they've already done an outing up in the mountains in October. All these colleges come together at the Young Life camp up at Cripple Creek up in outside of Fraser, I think. And it's like all these universities, and they do zip lining. But the thing is that he has friends now, and he doesn't live up there, and he's not in the Greek system, but he has a huge group of friends. Last night they played volleyball and had pizza. And then the night before, it was the freshman meeting where they do a freshman Bible study. And then he's on a freshman group meet with all the freshman Young Life kids. And you can imagine at a university of almost 40,000 kids how big the Young Life group is, So they do barbecues and all kinds of sports and getaways and retreats. And he's only been doing it for like less than a month. And he's got so many friends already. He drove 5 boys up to the retreat.
Yeah. So that was a great answer to the question. How do you know if you're a good influence or a positive one? If you raise positive, influential kids, you did the job well.
I guess I strayed a little because I don't know that I live up to what I'm supposed to do, but they've turned out well. But, when I yell at them, I feel bad, like, that's a terrible example. Or like somebody in traffic a few months ago, they were like a jerk and they honked at me and I stuck my tongue out of him and Riley made a face. And then I said, oh gosh, we should never do that because we could get shot, and I said, sorry, I did that. It was a bad example. And my son's like, I don't care. She was a jerk. And I'm like, yeah, but we shouldn't do that. I'm a horrible example. And so, I'm trying to be a better example, but I think that, when I have for me, I am able to practice my faith and be a good example through choosing guests wisely. I think that oftentimes are talking about their books or their lives or their testimony. Oh, and the other great testimonies besides those prisoners were the Denver Rescue Mission. If you ever get a chance to look into their program where they rehabilitate homeless, people, drug addicts, other people that are getting through addiction, it is mind-blowing the turnaround these men make.
Well, Angie, I just want to thank you for everything you do and the years that you've worked with The Good News with Angie Austin, that airs on AM 670 KLTT Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. So definitely tune into that. And thanks for tuning into the Corner Cafe. I'm going to have Angie Austin back in the future, and we're going to see ya next week.